Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 163rd Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will tackle the topic of financial crises and ask the question, is it repeating itself? Financial crises occur on approximately 10 to 15-year cycles and are usually followed by a flurry of legislative activity designed to make sure it never happens again. These new laws are typically rolled back or eroded over time, creating the environment for yet another crisis. Our panel will try to make sense of this destructive pattern. Our panel, beginning on my left, is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Patty Haskins, member of the Wadsworth City Council, and on her left is Joe Gaines, faculty member of the University of Akron. Bryan, this is a tough topic. I know that it is, and that it seems as though Congress is currently setting the stage to have yet another financial crisis. Do you think so? And is there anything we can do about it?
I don't think we're heading for another crisis like we experienced in 2008. I lived through that. I lived through 87 and 91 and a variety of downturns where the sky was falling and it was the beginning of the end and everything you can possibly imagine. But we always came out of it at the very end of it. Markets correct. What happens is that to somehow mitigate the depth of a crisis, Congress gets involved. This last time in 2008, they decided that the issues were the banking and the ability of banks to invest in other areas other than just mortgages and things of that nature, financial products and things of that nature. So what created it was and I'll just briefly say that the government encouraged people, they wanted more people to buy homes. And they allowed banks to loosen the lending standards. So there were mortgages given to people that had no assets and very little income. A lot of those mortgages were concentrated on the West Coast, areas where homes usually experience a 2, 3, 4% a year appreciation rate. And there were individuals buying homes just for speculation. They couldn't afford it to begin with. And what happened was those mortgages, to make them, I guess, desirable for other institutions, they created derivatives. And so they took a regular mortgage, and your regular mortgage is made up of principal and interest. And your mortgage payment, when you make it, so much of it goes to principal and so much of it goes to interest. Well, at the very beginning of your mortgage, most of it goes to interest, very little to principal. And I know this is very rudimentary, but I think it's good to understand what they did to the mortgage. They sliced and diced that mortgage to where they created a derivative that might take all of the principal and sell it to an institution. They took some of the interest and they sold that off in another derivative, and they packaged these in large bundles and sold them to other institutions as a way to generate income, interest income to their clients.
Let me stop you here to ask a question. Am I right in assuming that the market for these derivatives was there?
Yes.
Because these other institutions still had this in mind, the traditional value of mortgages, which was always pretty high.
Correct.
But they weren't anywhere near that valuable.
Correct.
But they thought they were.
They thought they were. They thought they were getting a mortgage. Now, the people that engineered these knew what they were doing, and the people that bought them knew what they were doing. But when they were resold in the retail market, those people didn't understand that they were getting a portfolio of derivatives, and in some of those derivative pools were some very bad apples. So when people stopped making their mortgage payments, that created a ripple effect. It wasn't just a ripple, it was a tsunami. And so not only were people not getting their principal back, they were not getting their interest back, and it had a multiplying effect on that derivative. So it wasn't just you were losing the interest, you were losing more than that, because those derivatives, when they were placed in these things, were given a value that was sort of out of this world. Now that's a very simplistic way to understand it, and for this conversation, I think that'll do, and I'm sure there's a lot of other derivatives that were out there. There were a lot of crazy things that were happening. So when that started, that created just this tsunami of debt that the government had to step in and do something about it. They had to create liquidity. The Fed had to step up, and they pumped, I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars into the market, because the banks were in the process of going down. And you can't have that. You can't have the banks basically saying, when you go to your ATM and you go to take out your $100, you're not getting it. So to forestall and to basically, put out this you could call it a forest fire. The banks came in, the government lent them the money, they flooded the market with liquidity, and people were able to right themselves. Yeah. Now, what's come of that is that they've come up with more legislation. Dodd-Frank basically said, we're going to stress test the banks now, and we're going to limit their abilities to do certain things. And within those stress tests are some pretty high bars that banks have to clear. And any institution that was deemed a risk to the economy, that could have been an insurance company. MetLife was considered a risk. They sued and got that overturned. Large banks, anybody that could actually, if they went down, it would be considered a risk to the economy. They are put in through these stress tests, and I don't know all the specifics of it, but they have to report. They have to keep so much liquidity on hand. At any given point in time, banks don't keep a lot of money on hand. If someone were to walk into the bank and ask them to take out, $50,000, they could probably do that. But $100,000 in cash, that's probably not going to happen in a day. Yeah. They don't keep that type of money around. It's all, it's all computer generated and flow, funds flow and all that kind of stuff. But it's a situation where I think there's enough of a safety net in place. We can't do stupid things. People aren't doing those things. There are no more ninja loans, but we have to be aware of
just
those things.
One question for you before we move on to Patty and examine what she's thinking. But isn't the Congress in the act right now of eroding Dodd-Frank?
Certain aspects of Dodd-Frank. We need to work hand in hand with these institutions. The unintended consequences of Congress basically telling banks they could loosen their lending because they wanted more people in homes created the impetus of the mess. And now, we have to sit down with the people that are on the private side and say what's working and what's not working, and have a meeting of the minds. And I think that's what's been happening. And so they're loosening some of those requirements, but not substantially.
Patty, I hate to blindside you with this question.
Uh-oh.
But in 1933, the Glass-Steagall Act was passed because the very thing that Bryan is talking about that occurred in 2007 and 8 led to a Great Depression. So we passed this Glass-Steagall Act that limited the bank's ability to buy these worthless commodities and so forth.
Exactly.
And then we decided, or at least Phil Grom and some other senators decided that Glass-Steagall was not good. It was too restrictive on banks and organizations. As a matter of fact, Enron wanted to have financial instruments that they could sell in order to boost their bottom line. And being a worthy Texas senator, Phil Grom put together a coalition that eliminated a lot of the things that Glass-Steagall stood for.
Right.
And Enron got even richer with poorer assets than they had before. But the Senate went along with it. The House, the Senate, both, at times of prosperity or at times where they want to create more prosperity, they erode these things that protect us against the financial crises. I forgot what my question was going to be to you, but if you, what,
Do you remember
what would,
1933?
Yes, I remember
the
that.
question.
Well, yes, I was in college then. When you go back in history, there has always had to have been reaction to financial crisis. You can start with FDR during the Great Depression, and he put into effect the New Deal. And I mean, there are still those that feel that nothing that he did was helpful to the country, and it only exacerbated the problems that they had within the country. There are those, though, that swear that that helped. Once the war hit, and people, that actually ended up being a boost to the economy.
Sure.
Unfortunately, we have to go to that extreme to have a boost to the economy. I think the attitude becomes, everything's okay now, and you alluded to this. Everything's okay now, so we can forget about all of this. It won't happen again. People will be careful. This is what happened with Glass-Steagall. It's passed in 1933 to prevent banks from making these risky investments, and to prevent that. And then it gets to the point, banks won't make those risky investments anymore. You go, fast forward and you go to Dodd-Frank, and Dodd-Frank is put into place, and that Bryan went into a great deal to explain all that Dodd-Frank did, and to protect, to protect the banking system, and we created these banks that are too big to fail. And there were quite a few that were placed into that category, and they had certain regulations on them that would prevent that type of situation happening again. Fast forward to today, and we've now decided that, we really need to loosen that up. And so what they have done at this point is have labeled all of these other banks into the same, they've taken them out of that category where they have to follow those standards, saying, they need that boost. Unfortunately, then you're opening yourself up, I think, to having the situation happen again. We don't seem to be learning from historical precedent. Instead, we're saying after a while, we just won't do it again. We'll drop all the rules, forget that, and move on. If you look at deregulation and regulations of the banks that were placed in, and part of that, one of the big moves with the present Congress and with our president is to deregulate. Unfortunately, this is something that has caused problems in the past. It's, I had read an interesting statement from a gentleman by the name of Steve Moore, and I did not know of this gentleman before, but he's an economist. He worked on the Trump campaign as an economic advisor in 2015, and he was talking about the economy. And he said there were three things that you needed to do to keep the economy going. And he said that there had to be deregulation. You also had to take care to deal with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans that the government was operating. The third thing he said, though, and this is again in 2015, is that we have to get control of the national debt. He said this was imperative. We absolutely have to do that, and in order to keep the economy going. So what are we seeing? Instead of controlling the national debt has grown at an exorbitant rate at this point. You had asked us originally, what Congress can do, what government can do. One of the things I think, this is the Democrat talking about this, I think they need to get control on the national debt. I understand many people were in favor of the tax cuts that went through in the last 4 years, and which did proportionately favor those on the wealthy end as opposed to others. Now, everyone can say they benefit, but percentage-wise, they weren't benefiting that much, and that this did help, and we're seeing it now, it did help attribute to this national debt, which can eventually affect the economy. I think we need to look at all of these things. Congress, by virtue of the fact they have control of the budget, can deal with this. And unfortunately, if it's a Republican Congress, certain things are prioritized and the budget is set out a certain way. If it's a Democratic Congress or House of Representatives, then it goes in a different direction. When you have one house is one party and one house is the other, as we have now, nothing seems to get done because they have totally different views upon what will help the economy.
Do you think that in some cases that they want the national debt to be used politically?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, to blame it on, it's the Democrats' fault. No, it's the Republicans' fault.
Well, I remember during Obama's term that Fox News ran a clock with that wasn't a clock, it was a tab thing that said, this is the national debt, this is the national debt. Once Trump was elected,
They stopped it.
They stopped it, right, and that's definitely political.
I just want to note, I am so glad that Patty has come over to my side when it comes to debt, and it took Donald Trump to do that.
Oh,
I
my
have
goodness.
always been a hawk when it comes to the debt. I've been singing that song for
But
the
he's
longest
increasing
time.
the
We
debt.
have less
I'm
than
saying that
90
he's wrong. He's
Right,
wrong.
yes.
He's wrong. When we've got to control that because there's inflationary issues.
Right.
What they've baked into this is that they're going to grow the economy out of debt. They're going to grow it so big, and the revenue's going to come in. You cut taxes, and more revenue comes in. That is a fact that there's been more. The government's been collecting more revenue. We don't have a, they say, well, we don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. We spend more than we take in.
I do think
and that adds more debt. So let's do something about
when
that.
you're in a financial crisis, certain spending has to be done to get out of that.
Right.
But then you have to start curbing that expense, and there just has to be better thought on the whole thing.
I agree with both of you. The only thing is that the average American looks at the economy right now and goes, it's never been better. If you listen to Trump, meaning the employment is down, employment is up, the money's coming in, it looks good to them. Now it's not in many ways, but to the average American, the economy is going in the right direction.
It's too
that right?
complicated for most of us to understand. I was a finance major, and it took me a long time to understand what the heck a derivative was.
Define derivative for me, please.
Oh, it's an instrument that derives its value from something else. In this case, a derivative was deriving its value from mortgages.
Well,
And they were of less value than the people who bought them thought they were.
see, it's terms like that in this whole subject that make me realize why I went into history and speech.
Well,
One of the issues is when, like with Dodd-Frank, it basically forced banks to consolidate.
Right.
And if you look around, we've seen it in our own little town, there aren't that many banks. The money's not getting to the end of the row, so to speak. It's not getting to the to the couple that wants to start a business because they cannot get over the hurdles that the larger banks require to borrow money. There's very few community banks anymore.
It's a wonderful life, Bailey Building and Loan.
Exactly.
Does not
We don't
exist.
have those
Okay.
anymore. We have Chase, Bank of America,
And Mr. Potter.
and they're these large. They're the only ones that can really pass the test. And so that's maybe the unintended consequences. We've taken that money that really helps small businesses away from them, and the only people that are getting the money are the large corporations that can prove and show and jump through the hurdles.
when Brenda and I moved to Wadsworth in the early 60s, we opened up an account with Wadsworth Savings and Trust. And we never left Wadsworth Savings and Trust, but it left us about 5 times.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, banks don't go out of business. You'll never lose money because they close one day, the feds come in, they arrange a sale, and it opens up under a new banner.
Yes.
You know, whether it's
Right.
Let's talk for just a moment about this concept of an organization being too big to fail. That's something that I had not heard of until 2008, 2009, that some banks, General Motors, organizations were too big to fail.
We build them out too.
Yeah, and I thought that that was a new concept. And then I found out that organizations were engineered purposely to be too big to fail in the 90s and the early 2000s. That was a fraudulent concept from the beginning. Now, when it comes to too big to fail, Milton Friedman said at one time that no, General Motors should have failed. We'd all been better off.
Yeah.
If General Motors would have just plain failed and gone out of business, it would have been replaced with something else. All of our needs would have been managed. But
the other side of that, though, is when it does fail, the carnage that exists, you know, to the people that work there, to everyone that's invested in that
Middle
company,
class.
and to the middle class. And yes, the company may show up again 2 years later, but what lies in the wake of that failure?
I understand that. I made my living for years in the tire
Right.
industry in Akron, Ohio.
Oh, absolutely.
I was around when 9 plants closed on the same day. Yes, there were a lot of difficulties, but we survived it.
One of the things, too, I like to point out when we talk about bailouts, to the best of my knowledge, all the money that was lent to the auto industry, to the banks, was paid back
Yeah.
with a very
It
healthy
was.
return.
Right.
Yes.
That
Yeah,
the government
and that
made,
was the thing with that. They did make that
the
agreement,
government
which was
made
good.
a lot of money off of that, and you know, certain people that are out there running for office, they talk about bailouts and all, but I agree. If you know, we could have let General Motors go down, and they would have emerged out of bankruptcy, but that the carnage, as Patty points out, between the time they went in and the time they came out would have been massive, because they employ more people, they have plants, all that kind of stuff. There's very seldom a clean bankruptcy, that you wake up and one day you've got all your problems. There's going to be pain, and some people are going to feel it. And in this instance, workers would have felt it, the economy would have felt it, and it would have been one more domino to fail. And when those dominoes start to go, you've got to stop it somewhere.
Well, that circles us back to this the repeating activity of financial crises. And yeah, there's always carnage during a financial crisis, but we pass laws to make sure it never happens again.
But then
and
we
get rid
laws.
of,
We get
then
rid
we
of the laws. And
Yeah, because
So-
somebody on the West Coast wants to sell more houses. It is something that, if it wasn't so darn complicated and people could understand what's going on, we could do something about it.
It's a good way of putting it too.
I mean, have you heard one thing out of one presidential candidate about the possibility of a future financial crisis and what might cause it? I haven't heard.
No.
You know, no, they want to talk about each other's attitude toward women, and
I think Elizabeth Warren has spoken a great deal about that. But I'm
Well,
not,
you know,
that is
yeah.
not an endorsement, but
that doesn't
Yeah.
make it to Fox News, though.
Yeah.
that's very true.
Yeah, and I think if we go back to the root cause, is that, you know, there are times when we have to be able to tell people, you can't afford this home. You can't afford this car. There was some lady on CNN that said people were taking out 30-year mortgages to get a car. That's not true. There's no bank out there that's going to lend you 30-year money on a car.
You know, maybe
it might be 6 years.
Maybe the change that needs to be made is we need to be able to supply more affordable housing and put our efforts into that, as opposed to these huge homes.
Maybe the government could incentivize developers to go out and put in affordable housing.
Is that
They've
socialism
always-
in some way?
What's that?
Is that a manner of socialism?
No, I think you can pull the levers and incentivize, you know, there was I think there's a development. They're trying to put a development in out here.
They are, yes,
You
just
know,
south
that
of town.
affordable homes for people,
That's
apartments and
that's
things.
been going on though all of my life.
But we need more of that, and it just, the housing, it just isn't there right now.
Yeah.
And I just read an article about that recently, about the amount of housing and how much more needs to be provided in this country, because there are not homes that, and if you're, and heaven help you, if you're working for minimum wage, you're never going to have a
Well,
home.
I can take you to Cuyahoga Falls and show you thousands of Heslop homes that were built, two-bedroom houses, one bathroom, built on a slab, no
Yeah.
garage, nothing. That was affordable. Well, thank you very much, folks. That turned out to be a little bit better than I thought it would.
Well, it's an interesting
Joe's
topic.
happy that it's over.
Well, very much so. But it's an interesting topic because it affects all of us in some manner.
Yeah.